Mr. Melody?
Here.
Mr. Weininger?
Here.
Mrs. May?
Here.
And Mr. Valentine?
Here.
And Mr. Harris said he will be a few minutes late, so.
Since we don't have our resident Pledge of Allegiance person to step up, let's go with Mr. Weininger.
Everybody, please join in.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Approval of the agenda for this evening's meeting. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Melody. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. May. We have added under
Good.
5B resolution urging all state and federal testing be waived for the 2020-2021 school year. We previously discussed that at the last meeting as far as the issue itself, but we will discuss that resolution and if appropriate, vote on it at that time. Any other questions? There's executive session at the tail end of the meeting. No action coming out of executive session. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Melody?
Yes.
Mrs. May?
Yes.
Mr. Weininger?
Yes.
And Mr. Valentine?
Yes, motion passes 4-0. Moving to COVID-19 discussion. Dr. Hope.
All right, thank you, Mr. Valentine. Let me welcome everyone here tonight, especially those watching from home on our live stream. Want to have a continuation of our discussion on COVID-19 and our district's efforts to prepare for a move to full in-person instruction on March 15th. Again, as we've been sharing, that is 2 weeks from the date of our second vaccination, which is this week for our employees here. So we're certainly thankful for that. Also want to just make sure that our remote learning academy students understand that when we talk about moving to full-in instruction, again, those families have made a choice to be remote learning for the entire semester here. So for the Board of Education, as we've been sharing, there's a lot of obstacles, there's a lot of icebergs, if you will, in the way of moving to full in, and we have been identifying and working through those. So we're going to have a little bit of a discussion on those tonight. Overseeing the identification of all the steps that we need to take at the secondary levels, our Director of Secondary Education, Tom McDonald, and overseeing the elementary and the identification of these challenges is our Director of Elementary Education, Tyler Wolf. So I'm going to turn it over to Tyler and to Tom to share some of the things that you are working through right now. Also want to involve Jeff Stark, Gail Marsh, Tracy Deagle in this discussion, Chris Andrus, Joe Reinhardt, members of our executive cabinet. This is truly a team effort, and I would be remiss if I didn't thank our teachers and our principals right out of the gate for all of their efforts, and again, preparing us for full in-person instruction as of March 15th. So Tom and Tyler, let me turn it over to you.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Hoadley, members of the board. I'd like to echo Dr. Hoadley's comment that with the people that we have in our buildings, this will be successful. It's certainly a very heavy lift, but I'm very proud of our building administrators, custodians, and teacher leaders that have come up with a lot of very creative solutions to make this happen. I would say that at the high school and the middle school level, that there's three major areas that I'd just like to draw your attention to tonight. First, the reconfiguration of classrooms. So there's a lot of work being done right now on the individual classroom level to reconfigure the classroom for full in based on the number of students in a specific classroom with the goal of maintaining 3 feet social distancing within the students in the classroom. So that would be the first area at the classroom level. Second, our buildings are developing transition plans to make this happen because there's a lot of furniture that needs to be moved. There's a lot of things in our buildings that need to happen. It was very clear that the collaboration between our building administrators and our custodians to develop a plan and a timeline with the goal of having the building in place by Friday, March 11th, so that we have it in place before the 15th, And so there's a plan that's being created in each building, collaborative plan. And the third major area, creating lunches with 6 feet social distancing for our students. And this creates a bit of an additional challenge in our buildings. And at the high school level, it's going to take some, the purchasing or reallocating in our buildings of some desks to replace our larger cafeteria tables so that we can maximize our square footage in our cafeteria. We're also looking at using our main gym and some of the bleachers there. So we have the space in the high school. So actually the cafeteria question, it's going to be reallocating of some desks into the cafeterias, the utilization of the main gym, pulling out the bleachers. For some students, we have the auxiliary gyms being used right now, so utilizing some of those space. So we have the advantage of space in the high school and larger spaces. We also have some larger classrooms where we'll be using some of our bigger spaces, media centers, that's at the middle and the high school level. So that would be an overview of the high school. At the middle school, the same 3 components, reconfiguration of classrooms, developing these same plans, our team plans. And then the lunch piece was a little bit more interesting at the middle level because we don't have the larger gym to spread out to. So in 3 of our 4 middle schools, we're looking at developing a schedule where we would split our lunches into 2, and it's really the equivalent of what we're doing right now in hybrid. But we would have 3 lunches instead of 6. So an alteration of the bell schedule, but we really feel like that's the best way for us to get 6 feet social distancing. Carr Middle School's footprint's a little bit bigger, and based on the student body and the number of students in remote, we're able, Brooke Menduni, the principal, believes that she's able to do it without having to go to the split lunches. We've noticed that working through our buildings. Each of our buildings is laid out a little bit differently, so we're kind of looking at those pieces. But it was definitely more of a challenge in the middle level with the lunches just because of the size of the buildings and large student bodies. And finally, with the middle level, we're looking to shift our bell schedule back to the original bell schedule that we would have been in under normal time. So an 8:28 start and finishing up at 3:08, because we'll no longer have the AM/PM schedule with the block of time in the middle and the second run of the buses. So that's just a brief overview. There's some purchasing, as you can see on the spreadsheet. We're looking to first make sure that any of the furniture that we don't need in some of our buildings, that if somebody needs it, we share that either within the secondary division or with Tyler in the elementary buildings. So we've worked closely with Mr. Stark and the operations team, and we realize that it's a collaborative effort at the building, everyone involved, to make this happen.
Thanks. I want to echo a lot of things that Tom already said. And first of all, it is very much a team effort. Tom and I talk every day about the different things that need to be done to make sure that we can bring all the kids back in full and still maintain all of our mitigation strategies, namely the 3 feet in classrooms and 6 feet during lunch. So at the elementary level, we are presented with some different challenges that we're currently working on, and they center around many of the same things that Tom mentioned. First being lunch, and in our current setup in most of our buildings, we can have roughly 60 students in each cafeteria with our current cafeteria tables and 6 feet of social distancing. So we've been working on different ways, different strategies, different configurations to enable all of our students to eat in the lunch room safely. And for example, there are some. Thanks. For example, there are some tables at middle school that perhaps the elementary could use. So we're working together to figure out how we could possibly transfer some of those cafeteria tables. We're also working with operations very closely to identify some different desk options, some chair options, where students might be able to have a chair that has a flip top desk so they could eat in the cafeteria at a safe distance. Some of the other things are the classroom. And at the elementary levels, we know that over the course of the past 6 or 7 years, there's been a move towards flexible seating in the elementary classrooms. So we're working to find ways to be creative and, and maintain 3 feet of social distance and use some of the RLA classrooms that are not currently full of students because the students are in RLA, and using those classrooms to store some of that furniture so that there can be other desks and so forth brought into classrooms so that social distancing can be maintained in the classroom. So we've been working closely with operations as far as moving furniture and getting those things lined up and ready to go. So we also are very aware that parents will have a lot of questions about the move to full in and the safety precautions that we're all taking to make sure that the kids have the proper physical distancing. So our elementary principal team, they are going to be holding Zoom calls with questions and answer sessions and explaining to the parents in their communities how they are helping to maintain those mitigations for when the kids do return in full. So I speak with all the elementary principals daily and weekly, and we're working through a lot of the challenges. And as we roll along, we're coming up with more and more creative solutions to how all of these things can be done. So everything from stools in the music room to tray tables students can eat on in the cafeteria to different seating options in the classrooms to maintain that 3 feet of distance. So that's a quick update of the elementary, and I just want to thank Tom and all of our in operations and all of our elementary principals and staff who've been so great about working together and thinking about creative solutions to these things.
Can I ask a question? I may know the answer to this, but I want to ask it anyway. Why do we feel comfortable with 3 feet social distancing in the classrooms? Case studies?
I think those are just the guidelines that we've been given from the health department, the 3 feet.
Okay.
It's just what we're operating by, to my knowledge.
And obviously, the mask wearing and all the other mitigation strategies that we have to be vigilant with in our schools.
Thank you.
Other questions for Tom and Tyler before I go over to Jeff and Gail?
So, Tyler, at the elementary school, right? Some of the meetings I've been on, been aware that there's some classrooms that have, 27, 28 kids in it. Elementary school classroom's not big enough for that many kids, so what are we doing to ensure that they're able to? That is a challenge that we're working on, and there are no easy answers to that, but have been working with HR and with Gail to possibly find some staffing that may be available to help out in those areas where we could possibly spread students out a little further into other classrooms that were perhaps aren't students, like for an RLA teacher's classroom. It does present a challenge in some of our buildings for sure. And we're in the process of trying to work out how that's going to look. But you're absolutely right. There are some classrooms that 25, 27, 28 students in a classroom will be difficult to distance.
Okay, and then for really both of you, from a lunch standpoint, are we assigning assigned seats or designated pods for contact tracing, or since we're going to maintain that 6 feet distance, are we not really concerned?
At the elementary, we would eat by grade levels and by pods. And the same would be true for recess at the elementary school. So class would come to lunch and then sit together, at the class and also grade level, go outside and be together in a certain area, the playground together as well. So if we did need to do contact tracing, that would be make it easier to do.
So that would be maintained by the classroom, not the broader grade level?
Well, it would be both. It would be at the grade level. The grade level would all eat together and go to recess together. And at lunch, I would imagine the classrooms would sit together. So you might have, say, 3 third-grade classrooms. All of third grade would be eating lunch, and then each classroom would be sitting together, if that makes sense.
So that is what's going to happen?
That's our plan.
Yeah, and we would have to do that at the secondary as well. If you have the 6 feet, in theory, you shouldn't need that chart, but it would definitely be wise for us to do so, and we will.
Can I just clarify something? I wasn't trying to put you all on the spot by asking that 3 feet social distancing question. I just know from the protocol committee and the data committee, there are so many studies and there's so much information on that that it is viable, and I just hope the information can get passed on to you so you can feel comfortable with it. So, thank you.
If there are no more questions for Tom and Tyler, I want to go over to Jeff and to Gail because there are several personnel items here, especially at the elementary level that Tyler has been working on with Gail. And then you heard a lot about furniture, and obviously our operations team, not just purchasing furniture, which not just Jeff, but also Shalina has great contacts in the furniture world. But there's a lot of logistical about just moving furniture around. So Gail, can you start off by leading us down a pathway of understanding of the personnel needs? And I know one of the benefits or blessings is with the drastic reduction in the number of COVID cases among our employees, our fill rate's been 100%, almost on an ongoing basis. But can you talk about specifically the full-in personnel needs, especially around the lunchtime that we've been exploring?
Sure. That's something that Tyler and I have been working closely together on. I know Tyler's been working directly with his principals to make sure that as we explore creative options with regard to lunch, and same thing with Tom, as building principals look at their building and their configuration, in some instances, there may be a need for additional lunch coverage. We term that building educational attendants or cafeteria monitors. So there may be a need based on each individual building. There's layers of support that we're going to put in place for those buildings that need that type of additional coverage. The first thing that our building principals do a great job is just utilization of their current staff and their schedule. So it may require staff members to have an additional duty if that fits in their schedule. The next layer of coverage, though, is our existing staff. So looking at our current staff, whether that's a current building educational attendant, a library aide, in some cases a paraprofessional, can they support that lunch coverage by potentially working an extra hour or working a couple additional hours? So that's one layer. Another layer that we're currently pursuing is we have crossing guards in a lot of our elementary buildings. Those crossing guards right now sort of have an extra midday duty because of the AM/PM schedule. So that's one of the things we were doing today is contacting all of our crossing guards and seeing who would be available to provide coverage and support us in the cafeterias. We're working closely with Jeff's group, with Amy Saleh. We have some bus drivers and some bus aides that don't have a midday commitment. So we're going to contact each one of those and see who would be available of that group. So building on our existing staff, who's available, who can provide that. Our staff's fantastic. I mean, they've pitched in through this entire last school year and this school year to provide needs. From our secretaries to our custodians to our teachers, when an extra need comes up, they step forward. And that's what will happen here for lunch coverage, because we'll need some additional lunch coverage. Every building's a little different. Dr. Hoadley alluded to it, and I've mentioned this to you before. Going into this year, we created what we call a floating substitute pool for certified teachers. That's very large. Typically, we would have somewhere between 10 and 15 what we call floating substitutes that have committed to just substituting in Dublin City schools. This year, that number is closer to 50. Because of our extreme absences and related to COVID, we wanted to make sure that we could keep our classrooms filled. Now that some of the cases are abating a bit, again, we can use those floating substitutes to provide that coverage. So I'm confident in working with Tyler and Tom and the building principals that we'll be able to support the buildings, because that's kind of where the pinch point is, at least mainly in lunch.
In operations, our goal is to basically figure out how to respond as best we can to all the requests of the principals as quickly and as effectively as we can. We are working closely with Brian Kern's group because we're going to be spending quite a bit of money over the next couple days. As far as the furniture goes, kudos to Shalina McConnell. She has come up with some various really creative options, and the options that we're looking at for furniture is not something that would just help us now during this crisis, but we want furniture that they can use later on. So we don't want to just fill the need now because it's a waste of money. This would be more equitable. So the options that we're looking at, and we've reviewed them all with the academic team, are options that we can use now to help the principals get past, and that we can also use in the future. We should start some of this ordering for basically the secondary tomorrow, and we're probably going to start ordering for the elementary probably soon after that because their numbers are starting to come together. Tom and Tyler have done a wonderful job with the principals in the fact of, you know, if there's a hole here, filling a hole here, because they want a lot of furniture out of the buildings to create social space. So one of the things we were looking at was to lease warehousing space, but to mitigate that, we do have one large warehouse at, it's an empty, it's not an empty building, it's a full building over at Shire Rings. And we are going to be going through that quite heavily over the next few days to see what we can clean out. And we are confident that we can get at least half, if not better, of that area cleaned out. That would save us from leasing any type of warehousing space. So that's a big thing that we're trying to do there. Other things that we're trying to do to ease the transition over to full for the school is we have 1,200 containers of Clorox wipes. Now that's pretty exciting. That's the times we live in. That 1,200 containers of Clorox wipes is exciting, but it is, and we're going to be distributing that to the schools. Because right now, you know, the teachers and the students are helping us quite a bit by spraying and wiping tables and this and that. We're going to be able to get them a few hundred containers to start with. They can use those at lunch. They can use them wherever they deem necessary. And as the supply increases on that, we'll get more in. We're also working with Tom and Tyler on all the schools on different areas that they need cleaned before it happens. So we clean the buildings every night, and they do get disinfected. But the large areas, sometimes there's a concern, are they getting cleaned heavily enough? So what we did 2 or 3 times already since COVID has started is we brought in some of these deep cleaning specialists where they spray down the building. They have this 30-day shield that they put things down with. We're going to be doing that right before all-in starts again. And lastly, like I said, having everyone from the bus drivers to our ground staff to whatever we can do, wherever we can fill that hole where staffing is needed, we're trying to do so. So right now, I think that we feel pretty good moving forward. And again, our first purchases will start tomorrow, and what we're working on is the lead times of furniture that should be here on time.
Questions for Gail or Jeff on this topic?
Jeff, can you talk about busing?
Sure. So on the question of busing, that's Amy Saleh and Brian Killian. They've looked at a lot of their routes. Our average route is about 10 to 12 minutes. That's as long as kids will be on the bus. There are some routes that go above 15, but they're very minor, and there's some that go under 10, but the average is 10 to 12 minutes. Another thing we've been doing to keep up with CDC guidelines for fresh air is it's a little chilly on that bus. We leave a couple of the back windows open, but we always want a fresh supply of air coming in the bus, especially if it gets more and more folks are on there. Kids are required to wear masks when they're on the bus. There's hand sanitizer as soon as you get on the bus. We have it installed in all the buses across, and those are checked to be filled at all times. So we feel confident with the busing. We were, again, working with Tom and Tyler on start times, which I believe, Dr. Deagle, the start times are all going back to normal? Yes. There will be normal start times. So we feel prepared for this. And as far as bus driver attendance, you know, at the height back in November, December, we were up to almost 30% down. That number has simmered down to a little about 10%. So our numbers are going in the right direction as well.
So Jeff, on the busing, will we have routes that have 3 students per seat, or will they all be minimum of 2?
I think 2 is what we're shooting for. But I would say that there could be times when there will be 3, but I think 2 is going to be the norm.
Okay, and there will be assigned seating on the buses?
Yes, the way the busing works is now that they know the stops, and it takes a little bit to get that assigned seating because, as you know, people will sign up for busing. I'm never quite sure who goes from signing up. So after they pull up a couple times and they notice who's coming on, it's first in, goes to the back of the bus, so no one has to pass each other, and then vice versa on the way out, and they start assigning that way.
Okay, thank you.
Will there be any routes over 15 minutes?
We don't think so. I want to say, when I say that, there might be some at 15 to 17 minutes at the high route, but that's the whole route. That doesn't mean the child is on it for the full 15 to 17 minutes.
Perfect, thank you.
Other questions for Jeff or for Gail? All right, Brian, Jeff had mentioned purchasing, and I think not just the board, but certainly our community, would like to know more about, a little bit about the Federal CARES Act money and how we're going to be utilizing and leveraging some of those funds to support this move to full in. Could you speak to that, please?
Yeah, and in this whole time there, for the most part, we've been using either ESSER funds is the acronym for it. 2 waves of them. We are on our 2nd wave of them that was given to us by the federal government and passed through the state. And so we also have CRF funds. So a lot of the disinfectants, the cleaning, and the supplies, and the mitigation stuff that we've used has come through those purchases, and as will this stuff too. We'll be looking to use the ESSER 2 stuff to be able to do that. That stuff was just allocated by through the federals through the state last Friday. So we're meeting that to where they want to make sure, among other things they want to do is talk about remediation, trying to catch kids up as, maybe have fallen behind due to the delivery method of education. But also too, though, is to make sure the buildings are safe and sanitized, and we can operate as if and we can do that and keep our, lessen our liability potentially that way.
Thanks, Brian. Any questions board members have for Brian?
So.
Do you feel as if the money that we're getting from the federal government is enough to cover all the concerns that we have?
At this time, yeah. This second allocation, with the first 2 allocations, it kind of got us through this point in this time. This second ESSER allocation can run through, I believe, almost through the federal year, which is September of '23. So even if we have to expand a little more into, let's say, for example, maybe next year we'll be able to do it. And we're already working on different strategies with Dr. Deagle and some of the academic crew on that. But that allocation was $4.7 million. So we were very thankful to have that. And that's kind of indicative too, just kind of, it talks about, they kind of base it off Title I numbers and stuff like that. And sometimes people don't realize we do have a significant population of the socioeconomic need there. So we're very thankful for those monies, and that should be able to carry us through. Plus with in some of the, I know Jill has some summer remediation stuff already started from kindergarten on up. And different things like that we'll be able to use those monies on to help us get through.
Is that including some of the additional personnel costs as well that
Yes.
Gail talked about?
Yeah, we'll be able to do
Okay.
those.
Brian, thank you. Let me round out our conversation now. I mean, we're a school, so I want to talk about the educational piece. So I'd like to bring Tracy, Chris, and Jill into the conversation. And really, we've heard a little bit about changing of start times. I want to double back to make sure we have clarity on that. Chris, obviously, you've been doing a wonderful job leading the protocol committee, and we know that. We've heard a little bit about lunch will be 6 feet, but classrooms are 3 feet. So emphasis on some of the other mitigation strategies and just the things that we're doing educationally so that we can support our teachers in the effort to help them make sure that when our kids return, we're ready to go. So could each of you kind of share from your perspective where you're working at?
So I'll just go ahead and begin by saying you're absolutely right, Dr. Hoadley. It was our full intention that when we returned fully with our students during the pandemic, we would return to our normal start and finish times at each of our buildings. And so that's what we will do when you do vote to pass a resolution to put us back into full return, is we will be back to our start and finish times as normal. Chris, mitigation?
Yeah, Dr. Hooley, you're right. I've got the pleasure of working with a great group every Wednesday. Mr. Melody gets to join us from time to time, every time. And what we have done recently is talk about big picture items like 6 feet, 3 feet, but also down to individual specific things. So for example, when we're talking about related arts, what should we be doing in our choir classes, in band, in art? So little things that I think we're going to be able to do that will increase the safety for our students while also making sure that we do this full return in a great way to be able to help our kids come back to see their friends, to see their peers, to interact the way that we want them to do, while also as safe as possible. So, Mrs. May, you asked the question about 3 feet a little bit ago. Personally, for my answer, every day I get to work with our nurses and I get to look at the data and the information that's coming into our district. And the overwhelming majority of individuals that report COVID to us are happening from outside exposures. The things that we do see inside of school, rarely have we seen anything that we believe is transmission within the school. And I think what's changed for us is masks matter more than we thought originally. And so when the Ohio Department of Health comes out and talks about this thing called a modified quarantine, What they're doing, and parents, you'll hear a little bit more about that as time goes on, but what they're doing is saying we recognize that in schools, if you are masked and you're washing your hands, the distance isn't as important as we thought that it was before. It's still very important, and that's why we say 3 feet. But masks matter so much. So when we talk about cafeteria, we're going to do the absolute best that we can to make sure when masks are off, it's 6 feet, because we do know of spread that way. So 6 feet is a hard line for our protocol committee at lunch, but understanding that masks are so important, and we think that that will minimize spread, because we're just not seeing it in our schools and in our classrooms.
And Jill, we'll send it over to you, but we do want to emphasize, our friend Doug Baker asked that we emphasize that the RLA schedule is staying the same, while our students who are in hybrid will return to their normal school hours.
Yeah, thank you for that. In terms of the work and conversations that are happening in my areas, we've worked with Jeff a little bit in talking about the furniture options to make sure that whatever we pick, we can then use afterwards. So for instance, if we end up with those trays, they might be perfect to use for writing, or they might be a nice tool to have as almost a standing desk option. So we are working collaboratively to think about how that looks afterwards so that our purchases are smart and can be utilized academically when we're all done. The other thing I want to mention too is summer learning, not necessarily remediation, but summer learning opportunities will be there hopefully soon, or more sooner than later, for parents, so that they'll know what kind of options we have for this summer. So in collaboration with Tyler and Tom, we're in the process of talking now what kind of summer learning options will there be. And some of that will be remediation, but we hope to offer some things that just bring kids back together, because they have been isolated for a while, and we do want to have some time to bring those kids together and reacquaint themselves with collaborative kinds of learning. And that goes with what Tyler mentioned with the furniture in elementary. As we've moved academically to a more collaborative environment for learning, there are some different kinds of ways kids will have to act now that we are trying to have social distance. So those kinds of norms in the classroom, when you bring back 20 kids, that's going to be some time for our teachers and for our kids to get more used to a different type of interaction in the classroom. And so we're thinking a lot about that and talking with our teacher leaders about that. What questions do you have for the three of us?
I had a question that's probably more for Dr. Hoadley. So looking at the CATS dashboard and the tracking, I'll say the community and the district has come a long way. We're at a high of over 900 students and staff quarantined or positive back in November. And as of today, it's less than 70. So that's a fantastic job by everyone. But it's obvious that the mitigation strategies do play a big role in that. Do we know when those mitigation strategies will be available on the public CATS dashboard for the public to be able to see how the school and
Sure.
people are doing?
Right now, there is not plans to make that data on the public, only on the private dashboard. There's some anonymity in some of our small buildings there, so we can explore that. Right now, the survey for those is a survey that our teachers complete. About 20% of our teachers complete the survey on a daily basis, and I should say 20% of our employees. And the data is aggregated by building. And so right now that's on the private dashboard. I'm not sure that there's plans. We can certainly explore those plans to put on the public dashboard, but we could probably take snapshots of it if we wanted to use that for communication purposes, more through Doug's office.
Okay, so are the building level administrators looking at that data and trying to understand how they can improve it?
Yeah, in fact, I think it was about a week ago, I think I gave Tom and Tyler the spreadsheets by building results, because it shows opportunities. I mean, we're doing a great job, but we can always get better. And again, those mitigation strategies are so important because, as Chris Andrus mentioned, the transmission internal to our school is almost nil, and it's because of the strong adherence to the mitigation strategy. So yes, we share those. We get those on a weekly basis, and we'll continue to share those. I think it'll be Wednesday. The next batch will come out, and I'd be remiss if I didn't thank Scott Gill, because he's been instrumental in dialoguing with Ohio State University. One of our doctors originally, Dr. Heather Tubbs-Cooley created that survey. We've now transferred it over to OSU, and Scott's been instrumental in that.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions for the group?
So just in general, is the feeling among everyone that's been making all these preparations that we're looking toward the 15th? And unless we see something that comes up as a significant problem right now, we're looking at, hey, we think that'll go. Because I think one of the big concerns that we raised at the last board meeting was, can we operationalize everything that we've talked about? And from what I'm hearing, we can. I just want to confirm that's what we're saying.
Mr. Weininger, that is what we're saying. Ultimately, as you know, it'll take a vote by the Board of Education to make that move from hybrid into full in. Whether that happens at a special meeting or whether that happens at our March 8th board meeting, we would certainly alert you if there are some operational issues that come up. We're also tracking the COVID numbers daily to make sure that that continues. As Chris said, masks matter. Huge. That's a big learning from the fall. Vaccinations matter. This is week 2, or the second round of our staff this week getting vaccinations. We've also been able to dialogue with the governor's office, those who missed the first round for quarantine or COVID positive. We're working with the ESC to get those persons vaccinated. Our COVID numbers continue to drop. And Mr. Melody, I appreciate you saying like below 70. It was 900 per 100,000. Just seems like 8 to 10 weeks ago, and now we're under 100. That's a fabulous improvement due to everybody, not just in the school, but also in the community. We do have to make sure that COVID fatigue doesn't sneak in and we don't get lax either in school or in our community over these important mitigation strategies. But again, I want to emphasize little to no spread of COVID in our school. As Dr. Deagle said, it's always been our intention. Our goal has always been to get our kids full in-person instruction. Really, really proud of our principals, our teachers, our parents, our students, all of our members of our community working together. And if I could highlight one special group, our doctors committee. We would not be having this conversation would it not, or had it not be for the multiple members of our medical profession that are just volunteering week after week after week, helping us, guiding us, and allowing us to make these decisions that can return our children back to our schools full and in person and do it in a manner that is safe to our students and safe to our employees. Any final questions? Sorry.
I just wanted to add, on behalf of all the parents that want their kids back in school, on behalf of all the parents that are nervous about getting their kids back in school, thank you to every single one of you all who have done the heavy lift to get this done. It is Herculean. So thank you so much.
All right, if there's nothing else at this time, just one reminder, I think Eric or Doug or somebody put it up, to hit your mic when it is time to talk. Moving on to public participation, visitor comments. Nobody signed up. Moving forward into work session topics. Dr. Hoadley.
All right, thank you. Thank you, members of the board. Let me first off bring up Tom Ireland, our representative for our Tolles Career Center. Great things happening at Tolles. I know they're dealing with the same thing that we're challenged with each and every day, but slightly different with the vocational area. But Tom, thanks for being here tonight, and thanks for your leadership at Tolles.
Sure. Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it. And I'd like to just give you a few updates on vaccinations. As you mentioned, your staff is going through it right now. Madison County was a little bit behind. We're actually going to be starting. Didn't follow directions. Apologize. But Madison County is a little bit behind in the vaccination of the school districts, and actually this Friday is going to be the start of our vaccinations for all of our staff at Tolles, and then the plan is the middle of March will be the second vaccination for all the staff. We're hoping that stays on that schedule. It's moved a few times in the last week due to lack of vaccinations available. So we're hoping that that continues. Get an update on our hybrid remote learning model that we're in. If you recall, we're currently in each student is in there 1 day a week, and we have students in the building 4 days out of the 5. The 5th day is a special day for academic help. If students need to come in for academic help, they can by scheduling that work. We're moving towards a update to that. We're hoping the 1st and 2nd week of March that we'll be able to bring the students in for 2 full days of instruction in their career tech labs. With that, with 2 full days of career tech lab, that's almost, it's very close to being what the normal career tech lab education is. So we're hoping that we're going to be able to do that the first couple weeks in March. That is the plan at this point, and we're moving towards that. And then finally, as you recall, or maybe recall from last year, recruiting for tolls, we try to get students out to the building to see what's going on. Dublin never really, we never really were able to work it out in the prior years to get Dublin students out there. Last year we were able to get actually most of the Dublin sophomores out there to visit tolls. We were hoping to be able to do that. We actually have scheduled March 3rd, we're getting about approximately 40 students from Dublin to come out and tour tolls. So we're starting to, we've been struggling to get Dublin and Hilliard students just because of scheduling and getting everybody together and keeping, the distances and so forth. So we're very happy that March 3rd, we're having 40 students from Dublin come out and visit tolls to see what tolls is about, and hopefully we'll continue to get more and more students out there. So that's all I have. Be glad to answer any questions.
Tom, I know we've had some recruiting events, and the one that you just mentioned as well. When will we know about enrollment numbers and whether they're having difficulty getting students and such?
Sure.
Is there a date that we should be kind of looking at to maybe analyze?
Sure. Rick, we've actually already started accepting applications, and we do have a number of applications at this point. Unfortunately, I don't know that exact number at this point. I believe it's around the end of April is when we have kind of our end of applications, and we start sending out acceptance notification to all the students. So I would say towards the end of April, 1st of May is where I think we would be, where I could report on where we are on enrollment for the following year.
Other questions for Tom? Tom, if I could just share, in your comments, first off, thank you again for your leadership. And we talk a lot and we think a lot about our students going out to tolls, but we know in this building here, our Emerald campus, we have several tolls programs as well. I just wanted to alert everyone, if you see the screen printing, the Dublin City Schools logo on the table skirts, that was done by our Dublin Business Academy, which actually is a tolls program located right to our right here tonight. So I wanted to alert you to that, and you can share. We're so happy that as we've moved into this new space for our board meetings, again, the tolls program, the toll students were able to do that screen printing for us. So thanks, Tom. Appreciate again your leadership.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
All right, next members of the board, familiar face, we have Christy Venny here, again, our coordinator of career education. Back in December, as board members, when you approved the high school course description book, we were excited to have a new program, an aviation program that Mrs. Venny has been working on for the last couple of years with Ohio State University. And in advance of a request of next month, when you'll be asked to approve a memorandum of understanding, we wanted to have Christy come here tonight. Again, share a little bit more about our program, our Taxi to Takeoff, and just how exciting it is to have an aviation academy and this wonderful partnership with Ohio State. Again, would not happen without Christy's great leadership. So Christy, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Hoadley. Good evening, everyone. It's good to see you all again. Before you, I noticed you passed around the MOU, the Memorandum of Understanding. I've brought up the Aviation Academy a few times before. I know it's familiar, but I wanted to remind you just a little bit about what that program was and then walk through this document and see what questions you might have. As Dr. Hoadley mentioned, we've been working with Ohio State University it's been several years now, trying to come up with how we can get this off the ground. I love that, by the way, that pun. I use it all the time with Aviation Academy. It's very appropriate. This program is going to be a 2-period academy here at Emerald Campus and at the OSU airport. So the program consists of 2 OSU courses, and they're listed here, and we'll get into those a little bit later. But students would take those classes virtually, and there's an instructor who we've been working with who would be the instructor of record, Dr. John Horak. He helped create this program and has helped been one of the visionaries along with Stephanie Morgan, the airport director. And we've also worked with Lori Misi, the Academy's administrator. So we've really tried to bring in a lot of voice into the program. We also did some focus groups with students to get their input on what they would want to see in the program. And this has been a long time coming. The MOU is something that we've gone back and forth on with OSU, and this is that draft that we're ready to share and get your input on. And it doesn't have to be obviously tonight. This can be something you ask questions tonight and you think about some more and let Dr. Hoadley and I know your thoughts. So this program, students would have to apply to OSU to participate. That would be an eligibility requirement, just like our other students who participate in OSU courses through the College Credit Plus program. And this agreement that we're looking at is a 1-year agreement, and it will be evaluated again at the end of the year. We do have hopes that this program will grow and that it will evolve over time. But for now, this is the agreement for 1 year. So when we walk through this document, the first part I wanted to draw your attention to, there's some great language around the purpose that I think we all feel very strongly about, the inclusivity and equity behind this, the purpose of increasing opportunities for youth to pursue education and opportunity in aviation and aerospace equally, regardless of race, ethnicity, gender, economic condition. Obviously, they're focusing on aviation within STEM and career exploration. This is addressing the growing demand right now that we're seeing in aerospace and aviation. And this program would be specifically for up to 25 of our students. This year, as you know, it's been sort of a tough recruiting year. We are going to continue. We have some students we know have already shown interest, and we will keep recruiting until the program is full. It will be open for them to apply to join through the OSU CCP application process. This is a pilot program, as I mentioned earlier, and it is 2 periods this year, but we hope to grow that and evolve it and eventually have more time at OSU's airport. They have a beautiful facility. If you haven't been there, we're hoping to arrange some socially distanced tours with OSU, so that's something that we will let you know when the time comes if you want to come check it out if you have not been there yet. The next section I want to draw your attention to, we have some responsibilities outlined in this document. Much of that are things that I will be doing. I've been named in the document to oversee some of those things, including administrative support, notifying students of the application requirement, and that students, we know they're going to be participating online in these courses. In the future, that, like I said, might change. I listed the courses. I wanted to just point out it's a 3-credit-hour and then a 5-credit-hour OSU course, the first in the first semester, the second in the second semester. Our students would be eligible then and prepared to take the written pilot's license exam and the remote pilot license exam, which is the drone pilot license exam. Fun fact, a lot of that content is overlapping. I learned from Dr. John Horak, which is interesting to me. I didn't realize there was such overlap between flying an actual plane and a drone. Lots of stuff about aerospace, I guess. The next section is about communications and branding. They have a very, very tight branding program at Ohio State, as you might have heard about that. We obviously wouldn't print anything without their approval, and they wouldn't either. It's an agreement both ways. We also have in this agreement that we would transport students to OSU when we have learning opportunities that take place there. So that's not unusual. We do that with field trips for programs at Emerald Campus all the time. It's located right across the street from Wright Elementary, so it's in our district's boundaries, which is very convenient. And also I wanted to point out in the program evaluation section, I'm listed as a person who will help evaluate the program along with some of their personnel. We'll look at things like efficacy, outcomes, logistical viability, and financial sustainability. So this particular document, you'll see, I think it's the second to last page, it mentions Mr. Valentine, Mr. Kern, and Dr. Hoadley would be our designees to sign for this. I will pause, that was a lot. I would take any questions you have at this time.
I have a quick one. Is this for Dublin City School students only?
As of this time, yes. That's a great question. We had said if we don't have students to fill that 25 student capacity, would this be something that we could allow other students to participate, like we have with our cyber program here. Our Hilliard, our district next door has had students participate. That is something that we would talk with OSU about. That's not something that is listed in this agreement. So we would bring that up with them. If we don't fill those 25 spots, that's a possibility. Great question.
I'm not saying I'm necessarily comfortable
Yeah.
with that, but is there a minimum?
At this time, we did not set a minimum. We really want to get this program going, and because their instructor will be virtual, they're willing to do whatever number,
Even 2
kids
students?
to 10. Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
good.
Yeah. They
Thanks.
are definitely, and I think we're hoping for more students than just a handful, but we'll see how that goes.
What's the feedback been like so far in conversation with students?
The ones that I've spoken with were just in the focus group. Since scheduling's happened, I've not been in contact since I'm not out in that position anymore to be in a building. But the kids were really excited that I spoke with. They wanted the hands-on experiences when they heard about the flight simulators that OSU has at their airport and the opportunity to talk to college students who are doing this. That really, you could see it light up their eyes when they talked about that. We know students love experiential learning. So they want to fly drones. Are we going to have drones? That was the question. So we've got to find some drones. That's definitely a must for them to practice and train with. But it's been excitement. And it's been the students I've talked to so far that this is an interesting point. I'm glad you brought this up, Mr. Valentine. It made me think about how the students that I spoke with and had a longer conversation with, there were 3 in particular, all of them had some connection already to the aviation and aerospace industry. And it made me think about how we need to get this in front of students who don't yet have that connection, but might have that interest or passion. So this gets back to making sure everyone knows this is an option and exploring those options as early as possible so that this can be something they consider. Because I do think it comes down to, if you know someone, sure, you might already be interested, but if you don't, maybe you're not.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah.
Ms. Benny, so this is great. I've been very excited about this from the very beginning. And just so, I think you might have said this, but we're going to be able to start next fall, as soon as school starts and everything is good. And hopefully we'll need these. And so we'll have classes ready to go in August. And this sounds like the kind of program where we're going to have more than 25 is the cap, right? And so that's a wonderful issue to have. How will you handle that? Just seniors, will they get priority?
That's a great question, Mr. Harris. And yes, I think you almost kind of answered your own question there in a roundabout way. This program would be similar to other programs that we have where if we've reached capacity, we would go by seniority. Students for this program do need to apply to the OSU CCP program, so they would have to be accepted there. That would be one criteria. And yeah, that would be just the one, but then the other would be if we were to have more than the capacity number for the 25 for this year, then we would say, okay, now seniority would be the next thing we would put in place after that. So if we had younger students, they could always do it the next year, but we want to make sure those students who, this is their chance, they would get that chance to do so. Yeah.
That's really cool. That's a wonderful building over there, too.
It's a great facility. And they actually have a lot of history in the building. If you've walked and seen the artwork and sort of like the history that, if you ask for the tour, it's amazing. Some newer areas in the building, it's a great place to visit. Strongly recommend. Yeah, thank you.
Christy, this is basically the ground school portion of working toward a pilot's license, but you said one of the big goals is to prepare them to take that private pilot's license at the end of this program. Is that correct?
So this would help prepare them for the written portion.
For the written portion?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it does not prepare, they would have to go beyond that.
Yeah,
if
they
were
still have to
yeah,
do their
there'd be-
other portion up in the air.
Yes, and
but-
that would not be the part we would do.
And we don't do any part up in the air at
No.
this time. It would be mostly the simulators and maybe flying drones and things like that.
Yes, absolutely, you're
So
correct.
there's no additional insurance concerns based on what they're doing.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, that is correct.
What final questions do you have for Mrs. Venning tonight? All right, hearing none. Christy, thank you so much for that presentation, answering those questions. And members of the board, again, next month in March, we will bring this back for your consideration. Should you have questions about the wording of the MOU, any thoughts, you can reach out to myself. I'll forward that over to Christy there. But Christy, again, thanks, and exciting to see this program take off.
Thank you so much.
All right, our final presentation tonight, and hopefully a familiar face, but you met Aaron Schulteis, who's our new coordinator of online education and leading DCS virtual, but it was in a Zoom meeting. So this is the first time I think Aaron has been with us face-to-face. Just came in this year, doing an outstanding job leading DCS virtual. Again, for members of the board, a couple things tonight, and there's a presentation you can open up if you want to follow along. Want to make sure that, again, that we have continuation or understanding of the vision from 2 years ago when this was really, this program was thought about to today. We just want to make sure we're on the right track, but we know the world has changed greatly, and that original program was 9 through 12, and Aaron's going to talk about why we're talking about K through 12 tonight and how that looks different. So Aaron, welcome, and thanks for all your work in leading DCS virtual. And let me hand the baton to you and let you run.
All right, thank you, Dr. Hoadley, and thank you, everyone, for allowing me to be here tonight. It is a pleasure to see everyone face-to-face for the first time. I would also like to introduce, she's not here with us, but Dr. Natalie Henderson for online learning, and she comes with a unique background. She has a degree in art education. She's been an administrator and also a curriculum developer. And she's able to take her background with graphic design to create some pretty incredible pages, but also use her background in content development to have those conversations about standards, rigor, and aligning the courses to what's going on in the classroom. So Natalie, Dr. Henderson's here with us in spirit right now. Some exciting news I'd also like to share is we have a logo. That we were without a logo. Last time I talked to you, I think we were without a name. So we since then have a logo, and we also have an official email address. We had approximately 25 applicants. We put it out to the community. We had students, staff, and parents, guardians, community members submit logos. And the one we landed on is from a parent. We felt that she really represented our vision for DCS Virtual. It's an image of a book that kind of evolves into a tablet. So we celebrate officially having a logo. The two buckets that Dr. Hoadley mentioned, the first one is DCS Virtual K-8. And as you know, this wasn't part of the original vision for DCS Virtual. But what we're learning after living through a pandemic is that there is a need for a continuation of Remote Learning Academy. So what our goal is, or our vision for DCS Virtual, is to continue what we have going on right now. Full-time students, full-time teachers, and a synchronous learning environment where the students are meeting with their teachers. There's check-ins throughout the day, live sessions, as well as asynchronous learning going on. So this is basically a continuation of what we have going on already. We're not in this alone. There are a lot of other districts looking into this right now. I've heard from 2 districts, and I met with one who is trying to figure out how to continue to do this and offer this for their students as well. So collaborating with the community. And then we also have, or actually going back to DCS Virtual K-8, as we're in the beginning stages of planning, we have a committee of teachers and administrators that are helping go through all of the feedback from the current RLA staff. That way we can ensure that what is working really well, we can build on that and also look for any areas of growth and continue to improve in that process for next year. And then what we're going to focus on today as well is DCS Virtual High School. That looks a lot different than K-8. Our teachers are monitoring the course, but it's an asynchronous learning opportunity. So that means there are no live sessions. The teachers are providing feedback to the students. It's a in addition to the student's typical learning schedule, so they can take this outside of their traditional learning day, and it really provides flexibility for the students when they're scheduling, so they can do some great things like the Aviation Academy and other opportunities we have within the district. Before moving on to focus on high school, is there any questions about K-8 or high school? Yes.
I have a quick question about what prompted us to extend it down to K-8?
Well, there have been some conversations about the need for having a continued remote learning academy. So that's when I've collaborated with members here as well as other members within the district to offer a continuation of what we have going on.
Do we have a lot of parents that are doing that?
We will find out. We're sending out an initial interest survey in the next 2 weeks, and then we will ask for a commitment 2 weeks after that. We want to ensure that the parents understand what this is, what this learning opportunity looks like, and the requirements for participating in the K-8 DCS virtual. Any other questions?
Will the K-8 be dedicated to grade level, or will there be multi-grade levels combined into a single class?
It depends on what the enrollment numbers look like. There is an opportunity for that, and especially with related arts, we have been calling it even learning pods to offer multi-age group opportunities. But for the traditional classes, it depends on what enrollment numbers would look like. We'll have a good idea of enrollment numbers probably in mid-April for both K-8 and high school. All right.
Well,
yeah.
based on the enrollment numbers, will we make an assessment as to whether it's viable to have the program, given the numbers that we have?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, so for DCS Virtual High School, last semester we rolled out 3 courses. They were health, financial literacy, and wellness and individualized instruction. We had 287 students enrolled in those 3 courses. Of those 287 students, 12% were from Jerome, 38% were from Kaufman, and 50 were from Scioto. And then of those 287 students, 33% were enrolled in health, 46 were personal finance, and then 19 were wellness and individualized fitness. We noticed that personal finance was the most enrolled in course, and that trend is continuing into next year as we look at early enrollment numbers. We had 40 students who were male, 60 were female. 6 students were on an IEP, and 6 students had a 504 plan. And then grade and age are both consistent with the high enrollment number for individual or personal finance, with 11th grade 17-year-olds taking that course. The courses from last semester were teacher-created courses for the most part, so they were still continuing to use what they had used over the summer. This semester, we rolled out courses created by me and Dr. Henderson. These courses provide consistency, more stylized, and easy to navigate options for the students. So it's the same content, but it looks a bit different this semester. So this semester, we do have 129 students enrolled in personal finance, still the highest enrolled course. Health is a close second with 110, and then wellness is 73 students for the semester, so approximately 300 students. We are going to seek feedback from students and families after the end of the semester. That way we can ensure the pages that we're creating are in fact easy to navigate, and students are being able to be successful. We're meeting the needs of the learners through the pages that we're developing. So we will use feedback to continually evolve the division and the pages. And then in addition to those 3 courses, we're also rolling out some courses for summer school opportunities. We have Art Foundations, ACT, SAT Prep, Fitness Trends, and Psychology. These, again, will be pages that we've developed. Dr. Henderson is working on the ACT, SAT Prep right now, and it is awesome. There are it's an asynchronous course, but there's still a lot of opportunity for individualized instruction. So students will take a pre-assessment, and then they'll have their own learning path based on their assessment needs. There's over 500 practice questions built within this course, not for the student to take all 500, but to take questions in order to improve their areas of weakness. So it really specializes in what the students need and provides that learning opportunity for them. And then in the fall, in addition to those 7 courses, we're also rolling out year-long courses for the first time. We have pre-calculus and English 4 that will be offered in addition to those 7 courses. We are collaborating with teachers. We're working to build the relationships with the teachers so that we can collaborate on the courses, and also a partnership with the DEA. And we have done some outreach. So Lori Marple and I did what we call a high school tour, where we met with all of the district leads from the high schools, showed them what we were working on, upcoming projects that may affect their division, and talked about ways to collaborate. We also compiled a list of their questions, and we're working with Donna to ensure that we can answer all of their questions and concerns about moving forward. We are also seeking input from families and staff on future development. So we want to know what interests the students, what courses they want to see as virtual options, and work to prioritize a list to meet the district needs. Is there any questions about high school? Yes.
So for the high school classes, I assume they get full credit towards graduation?
Yes, they do.
And since these are outside the typical classroom, the learning day, are there additional fees that they need to?
Currently, there are not, no.
Okay.
Summer school, there is the summer school fee that matches what it was last year.
Okay, thank you.
Are the summer school classes offered for credit as well?
Yes, yep.
And are all the classes that are listed, are they based on current graded course of study material?
Yes, they are taken directly from the handbook, and
Okay.
we work in collaboration with the teachers to build these courses.
So when Dr. Henderson is working on the courses, she takes the curriculum and is just basically translates it into an online course?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
And we typically try to work with 2 teachers to ensure that we're getting, unless there's more teachers who would like to collaborate with us, to ensure that we're getting a variety of options that's going on in the classroom. Yes.
In the future, when we're, like I say, in a good place, back to normal, no masks, we could really develop some great opportunities with, like, we have our community education program, where some of that's in person, involving learning to do certain things, that just like playing golf, for example. I don't know if we have that, but let's say we did that.
Okay.
You could do it via Zoom or this type of learning. But think about all the cool things we could do for, a micro course of like 4 weeks for pre-law, taught by some constitutional lawyers, and bring in a few judges. Of course, I'm talking about the law because that's what I do during the day. But that would be so cool because we have so many students that it fits in with Ms. Benny's goals as well, which you're actually already doing some of this already. And you could probably bounce from that into some 4-week classes. Again, we have right now a goal is to stick with what we really have to do to get back to a place before we get fancy with what we can offer. But that's going to be so cool in the future. It's cool now.
Right, right.
Even more cool in the future.
Well, and we're building the platform to be able to do all of that. So, and we talk every day about different ways we can take both of the divisions. So, yeah, that's a great suggestion.
Yeah, thanks. So,
Is our goal right now with the online classes to supplement what they're doing in their regular high school program, and then these are extra courses they can pick up? Or are they going to be able to substitute some of the online things that they're going to take? And that way, maybe are they reduced to maybe half a day if they're taking half a day in these other classes? Or how do we envision that's going to work?
Right now, we recommend that students only take one additional DCS virtual course per semester, and this is in addition to their traditional school day. So we're really using it for schedule conflicts and flexibility in scheduling. So that it is considered exactly if there are students taking personal finance during the day or a personal finance DCS virtual course, credit-wise and learning opportunities would be similar. Credit would be the exact same, but learning opportunities, it would be asynchronous, but similar content. So yeah, it is just in addition to what they're already taking.
And right now, that's the vision that we have for this program, but in the future, it could be more, but right
Yes.
now, that's what we're focused on.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Any final questions? Great,
Okay,
Erin,
thank you so much for this opportunity tonight.
All right. Board of Education comments before we get into the resolution? All right, there being none. Earlier today in coordination with a number of school districts across Central Ohio, and I think for that matter, the state, in particular, Sam Shim from Worthington has helped lead an effort to help school boards, school districts advocate for the Ohio General Assembly to waive all state mandated standardized testing requirements for this school year. Being such, I ask that we have on the agenda for this evening a resolution that would urge our state legislature to act accordingly. At this time, there's a number of different discussions going on down at the State House. I know that our teachers union and Donna have been active on this front as well. We covered this last meeting. Given the complexities of this school year, the challenges that we face, I do feel it's appropriate. And we don't often do this unless it's something that reaches a certain threshold for us to become active and express our voice. So I've asked for this to be put on the agenda at this time. I don't know if any other board member wants to have additional comments, and for that matter, Dr. Hoadley or members of our team, if there's anything that you would like to say relative to testing and especially in light of the circumstances with COVID and the challenges of the school year.
Well, just a couple comments. Last year, the state, of course, canceled the in-person testing because of the COVID situation, and I think it would be appropriate this year, given the amount of time that we have not been in school, to cancel it as well. I think that there are a lot of challenges, and probably Tom and Tyler would be would be good to talk about the number of challenges that we would have to go through to get a full complement of testing for all of our kids, for state testing and some of the federal testing. I think at this time it's a good thing to focus on the direct instruction for our kids rather than spending however long it might take to take all the state mandated testing right now. I think from what I've heard from other people as well, I think a lot of people throughout Ohio support this, and with a couple changes here, I would be supportive of this. A couple things I wouldn't exactly word some things and take some things in or out, but I think it's a good thing to recommend to our state legislators.
Do you want to mention what those proposed changes are?
Well, the very last whereas, I don't like the way that's worded at all. I would take that out, and I would focus on that the board is in support of in-person instruction rather than taking time. And I wouldn't say useless. There's a reason that we test. There are considerations that we have to take into account because of COVID and such, but there are good reasons to test students to find out, information about how they're performing and such. But I would take that section out and maybe put a whereas in about how we're supportive of direct in-person instruction at this time. And the other thing that I would probably adjust is the section 3 of the now, therefore. In section 3, I think that we don't need to list that the affirmative vote part, you know, once we vote on a resolution, it's a resolution of the board, and I just don't think that's necessary. But, you know, I'm just one person.
I agree with your points. And for all the same reasons that you said it very well. And I agree with your changes. So if you need a motion, I'll make it.
I was going to say, I agree as well. I think we should prioritize in-person learning or just learning in general instead of testing this year. And then it would just be, as you touched on, Rick, would be a logistical nightmare to try to get everyone together, especially the remote learning academy students, bring them back on site and administer this testing as well. So,
I have a question. Dr. Hoadley, didn't you encourage us to do this about a month ago?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, thank you, Mr. Harris. Yeah, in fact, we used the opportunity at a recent Business Advisory Council to advocate for this with our local senator and local House rep, and you know, for the reasons listed. I mean, you know, and just a couple other reasons. We have all heard the number of social emotional issues that our children are facing this year because of COVID. Outside of COVID, in a normal year, testing is stressful. And so bringing our children back and right away putting them in front of high-stakes tests just to me seems senseless. And again, as mentioned on the logistical challenges, which would be an absolute nightmare. And then finally, I would just add, you know, we have to trust our teachers. We do a lot of local assessments, our map testing, and if that will tell us which children have fallen behind, which have come out of this almost ahead some places, this is a time to trust our teachers and not to put our students in front of a full battery of high-stakes tests.
Is that it?
I'm not sure that we need anything.
I'm so used to follow-ups to your questions that it was like, I think everybody in the room was on edge waiting to see what the next question was.
I'm sorry, I should have just said thank you. Thank you very much.
With that said, I think just to keep it simple, Rick, that we strike that last whereas and strike the last sentence in section 3. And knowing that to be the case, is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. May. Is there a
Second.
second? Second by Mr. Weininger. I'm just going to...
And this is to amend the agenda,
Yeah.
correct, to make
Yep.
those corrections.
Yep, that's to amend. All right. Again, this is just to amend, and then we'll vote. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. May?
Yes.
Mr. Weininger?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Melody?
yes.
And Mr. Valentine?
Yes, motion passes 5-0. All right. I will read through this for this, especially since this was added today. I'll just go ahead and read through this. Resolution urging the Ohio General Assembly to waive all state-mandated standardized testing requirements for the 2020-2021 school year. Request a waiver from the state-mandated testing from the U.S. Department of Education and declare the Dublin City Schools Board of Education's support for House Bills 67 and 40, which would fulfill both requests in declaring an emergency. Whereas it's the statutory duty of the Dublin City School District to deliver the educational programs and services to the school children of the Dublin City School District, and whereas the members of the board are elected by the Dublin City School District school community to ensure that students are healthy, safe, engaged, supported, and challenged, and whereas the elected Board of Education is responsible to the community, including taxpayers, parents, and other patrons, as well as the state, and whereas the state of Ohio requires annual statewide standardized testing in accordance with federal mandates, and whereas the COVID-19 pandemic has created instructional challenges and forced educators to quickly adapt to new practices during the 2020-21 school year. Whereas the administration of standardized tests may create additional unnecessary health risks to students and district staff, and whereas the state of Ohio waived standardized testing last spring when learning was disrupted for less than half of the academic year,
And whereas the Dublin City School District and its educators already perform formative testing on every district student, and tests that during a pandemic are far more helpful and accurate in addressing student need. And whereas the results of the statewide mandated standardized testing won't be known until after the school year's ended and will be of no help to district students or the district's need to potentially address any disrupted learning opportunities the district students may face. And whereas the education professionals in the Dublin City School District are best able to assess those COVID-19 related needs better than an out-of-state standardized test developer. And whereas the Dublin City School District and its educators are committed to ensuring every district student is able to succeed, and that's the last whereas. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Dublin City School District's Board of Education that Section 1, the Board of Education urges the state of Ohio to not require the spring 2021 statewide standardized assessments to be given, and the Ohio Department of Education to apply the U.S. Department of Education for a waiver from the federal standardized testing requirements. And the board fully supports House Bill 67 and 40, which would do exactly those two things. Section 2, the Board of Education finds and determines that all formal actions of this board concerning and relating to the adoption of this resolution were taken in open meetings of this board, and any deliberations of this board and of its committees that resulted in those formal actions were in meetings open to the public and in compliance with all legal requirements. Lastly, Section 3, the Board of Education declares this to be an emergency immediately necessary for the preservation of the public peace, health, safety, and welfare of the citizens of the Dublin City School District. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. May. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Weininger. Questions or comments? I do think that, Doug, if we can get some sort of messaging out on this to staff tomorrow, just that vocalizes our stance on the issue.
Also, does Brian send a copy to our state officials, and maybe OSBA might appreciate a copy so that they can advocate for us as well?
Make sure we get that. I think this is getting coverage on the news tonight as well, from a text message I had from Sam earlier. Not necessarily us, but the
Great.
topic.
Thanks.
Well, that's my tile on my key. All right. That's a first. There we go. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. May?
Yes.
Mr. Weininger?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Melody?
Yes.
And Mr. Valentine?
Yes, motion passes 5-0. All right, Superintendent's Office.
All right, thank you, Mr. Valentine. And let me thank the board for taking that stand and really standing up for our students and our teachers, and making sure that when we do bring them back full in on March 15th, that we can have dedicated instruction from now to the end of the year. Also, when I was thanking people on the different move to full in, I am remiss that I didn't thank you as the members of our Board of Education. All of these COVID committees, the numbers, so many of you are not sitting on just one, but multiple, listening in on those during your workday, into the evening, sometimes as late as 10 o'clock. So let me thank you for your dedication as well. Members of the board, I just have one recommendation tonight, and that is approval of 8 revised policies. These are actually policies that would normally fall under Mr. Kern and Mr. Stark's domain in purchasing and in school finance. I want to highlight their efforts in reviewing these policies. These changes have all been recommended by our policy advisor, Neola, and are due to different changes in the state or federal laws. We had a first reading 2 weeks ago. I want to see if you have any questions, and if not, these policies are ready to be enacted tonight upon your vote.
All right. It's recommended by the superintendent, the Board of Education approve the attached revised policies. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Melody. Is there a second by Mr. Harris? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Melody?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Weininger?
Yes.
Mrs. May?
Yes.
And Mr. Valentine?
Yes, motion passes 5-0. Treasurer's Office.
Yes, just a few items on the agenda for this evening. Approval of some appropriation changes. We just recently received 3 teacher grants were awarded through the DEF. They're approving the appropriation of those funds this evening. A grant through Chris Andres and his group for parent mentor support for $2,000 is added, and then also our internal service 021 fund. This fund is primarily used for 2 different things: our testing at our high schools, the accounts that they have, and also our one-to-one initiative repairs. This fund has plenty of resources and fund balance where, as we went through the budget process last spring, and some of it due to COVID and when we didn't have as much expenditures as we normally would have in that spring and year, we kind of just under budgeted that area. So just make sure we have appropriations to expend for things where we have plenty of resources and balance for. So, and then also for your approval this evening is the financial report for the end of January. As you can see, for our general fund, we're pretty much on line with targets at this point in the year. I did want to point out this is our last week. We do receive, as part of some of the organizational meeting items, we are allowed to request tax advances for real estate taxes. And we'll receive this week the last one from Franklin County. And they are looking to settle for the first half there on March 24th. And hopefully Union County and Delaware County will settle somewhere, hopefully within a couple weeks after that, or at least a month. A little later than normal, but still, hopefully as 80% of our revenues come from our local taxpayers, either from a residential or commercial tax base, is very important that we want to monitor that as we move into our 5-year forecast update in May. So that is progressing along, and hopefully by the end of March, or as we move into April, we'll have a better idea how we are finishing in collection in this first half. Other than that, if there's any questions, that's all I have for this evening.
All right, there being none, it's recommended by the Treasurer, the Board of Education approve items 7A, 7B. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Weininger. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. May. Questions, comments? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Weininger?
Yes.
Mrs. May?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Melody?
Yes.
And Mr. Valentine?
Yes. Motion passes 5-0. Department of Academics and Student Learning.
Good evening, everyone. This evening I have 2 items for you to review in anticipation of you voting on these items on March 8th. The first is an overview of the proposal for intra-district enrollment caps for next year. As you know, after last year's redistricting process, we asked for a pause to intra-district open enrollment for at least 2 years so that we can, following such a large-scale balance of student enrollment, we could preserve that balance. And families who do move into our neighborhood attendance areas would not be bumped from their neighborhood building because of being over capacity. And so on March 8th, I'll be asking for you to set an intra-district cap, which is different than the square footage capacity for our middle schools. You did this last year for our elementaries, and we will be asking that you maintain those lower caps for our elementaries for next year as well. The second item for your review is our middle school course handbook. There are no large-scale course or structure changes to our middle school handbook, just a few edits that you will see marked in red, and we will ask for your approval after this first reading on March 8th so that our middle school families can begin their scheduling process. And that is all that we have for you this evening in academics. Any questions?
I would just like to take a moment to talk a little bit about the middle school and some of the changes that are being considered. I would like to thank Dr. Deagle and Jill Reinhardt for all the efforts that they put forth with the middle school principals and middle school staff to consider some ways to improve our middle schools. And while we're not converting this year, those are some pretty good goals that they've put together with regard to some foreign language ideas, some additional STEM ideas, and I appreciate it that even within the COVID situation that we're dealing with this year, that they are constantly looking forward to the good things that can happen at the middle school level. So with the adoption of the handbook, we're going to continue what we've been doing, but I'd like our public to know that our crew is always working to improve our schools, and I appreciate all the effort that was put into it. And I know Stu is a member of our board academic subcommittee, and we have talked about that as well, that we really appreciate all the work that it was done on that. So thank you very much.
Any additional comments? All right, Mr. Stark, operations.
Good evening, everyone. I only have one item for your consideration tonight, and that is our annual purchase of buses. These purchases come from our permanent improvement funds. If the board recalls, back in August of 2020, the board approved a resolution so we would enter into a cooperative bid with Meta Solutions. That bid that they do allows us a lot of flexibility in the type of buses we get to make sure the same manufacturer and different options. We're recommending tonight the approval of 12 school buses for an amount of $1,198,894. That's the purchase price less the trade-ins. And this will keep us on our goal that we set out 5 years ago of turning our entire bus fleet every 10 to 12 years. So this puts us right now at about, in the last 5 years, our fleet has been turned over by over half.
Any additional questions for Mr. Stark?
So, Mr. Stark, I see we're going back to diesel buses for this purchase. Is that still
great
due to
question.
the capacity
That's a great
of
question.
maintenance?
So we have a few CNGs, as you know, our compressed natural gas, and they're running quite well. And we're working with the city on, we were a little stalled with their maintenance plan, but we've gotten that back on board. The reason we don't want to get any more into CNG is for two reasons. One is the infrastructure, that we depend upon the city for the infrastructure for CNG, or we'd have to invest into a CNG garage. But the larger reason is, over the last 3 years, great advancements have been made in electric vehicles. And our concern is that if we continue down this path with gas, we'll have diesel, gas, and then if we want to try electric, we have 3 different modes. So we'll keep with the 2 right now, and that's why we decided with the diesel. You'll also notice that we're purchasing a few less school buses than we have in the last couple of years. And the main reason for that is that, we've had less miles this past year. So we're going to get a little bit more out of those buses because of the COVID situation.
Okay, thank you.
I think we also need to acknowledge our public support of the permanent improvement levy that they passed. Each year, we're able to do things like buy buses and really take care of our buildings the way they should be taken care of because of those funds, and our community being supportive of those levies that we need is really appreciated.
Absolutely.
Okay. It's recommended by the superintendent, the board approve the resolution for the purchase of school buses. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. May. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Harris. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. May,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Melody,
Yes.
Mr. Weininger,
Yes.
and Mr. Valentine.
Yes, motion passes 5-0. Department of Human Resources, Mr. Marsh.
Good evening. Tonight on the HR agenda, you'll see one stipend. That is for professional development, support for secondary teachers. A few folks that are listed there provide professional development for our secondary teachers. On a certified agenda tonight, would like to recognize some retirements. Stephanie Armbruster in our department in HR for 25 years of service and support for the district. In the teaching area, Jennifer Gaylord with 25 years of experience and support. And then Tish Holleran at Old Sawmill for over 35 years in Dublin City Schools. So wanted to recognize those folks tonight. And on the classified agenda, we also had one retirement, Deborah Forelli, a bus driver, and she is going to be retiring with over 15 years service to the district. That's all I had on the HR agenda tonight.
Any questions for Mr. Marsh?
No questions, but I can't help but see Tracy Deagle is leaving. That's a big loss. We're sorry to see you go.
Right. It's recommended by the superintendent, the Board of Education approve items 12A, 12B, and 12C. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. May. Is there a second?
A second?
Second by Mr. Melody. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. May,
Yes.
Mr. Melody,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Weininger,
Yes.
and Mr. Valentine.
Yes, motion passes 5-0. Mr. Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Valentine. Good evening, everyone. Just like to remind everybody that the last 3 days of this week, the district is in remote learning mode due to the vaccines of our staff. I want to thank our food service. They're providing 5 days' worth of food that those who signed up can pick up Wednesday from 11 to 1 p.m. at designated locations. That's just a really fantastic thing for our food service to do for those who need food during that time that we're remote and then over the weekend as well. Obviously, we're going to communicate heavily about March 15th as that approaches, and as the board continues to look at that, Dr. Hoadley did a video on Friday on that topic that had about 5,000 views as of a couple of minutes ago. And as we go forward, we will continue to put out like a Q&A, some talking points for principals, use all of our district channels, our school channels, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, everything we can to get that word out as we move toward March 15th, make sure everybody has as many details as is possible. On the non-COVID front, we've had a lot of Black History Month activity on social in all of our buildings this month. It's been really great to go out and see that and talk about that and tweet out pictures. You heard about DCS Virtual earlier tonight. We're helping Erin with the branding program there and with the logo contest that's completed now. And we're going to help her roll that out over the next 6 weeks or so. And then we have some events that are usually in person that we're going to do virtually this spring like we did last spring. Those include Leadership Dublin on March 9th, a Zoom tour of the district, summer job fair for students that we usually do after dodgeball. We're going to do that online. Community Champions will be online in video format again. So we're doing our very best to keep our spring events going virtually as we can during this pandemic. So that's all I had. Thank you.
Doug,
Yes, sir.
could you give us, not today perhaps, could you collect all the Black History Month events? I saw that there were some art shows. And just informally send the board a note
Sure.
so we can
Absolutely.
know what's happening.
Yep, we'll do.
May have picked up some of it on social media. However,
No,
it's cool to know everything.
we have that all collected, Mr. Harris, so we'll get that to you.
Thank you, Doug.
You're welcome.
Doug,
Yes, sir.
the several board members have also participated in the past with Community Champions, so I'm sure that if they needed us to do a little video, I'm sure Eric or someone would be willing to help us get a message out or present an award to a student or something to acknowledge those great kids and everything that they do.
Thank you for bringing that up, Mr. Reiner. Absolutely. I'll talk with Jenny at the chamber about that. I think we did that last year with maybe some scholarships, so yes, we can do that again.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, future agenda items? All right, executive session. In accordance with the Ohio Revised Code 121.22G, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, the Dublin Board of Education will go into executive session to consider 1, the B, employment of a public employee. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. May. Is there a second?
Second.
Second
Did
by
somebody
Mr.
second?
Weininger. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. May,
Yes.
Mr. Weininger,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Melody,
Yes.
and Mr. Valentine.
Yes, motion passes 5-0. There'll be no action coming out of executive session. Thank you and have a great evening.